despicable anti-Semitic act of terror. Israel condemns the abduction and murder of a Chabad rabbi in the UAE. 3 Jordanian police officers injured after a gunman opens fire close to the Israeli embassy in Amman. And Yemeni men are being tricked into fighting alongside Russian troops in Ukraine in a deal between Moscow and a prominent Houthi businessman. Israel has warned its citizens to avoid all non-essential travel to the United Arab Emirates after a prominent rabbi was found murdered in the Gulf state. Rabbi Tzvi Kogen, an emissary of the Chabad organisation, went missing on Wednesday. Authorities here have called his death a despicable anti-Semitic act of terror, while reports suggest Iran may have been involved. More in this report.
The United Arab Emirates, ranked one of the safest countries in the world in 2024, is now grappling with the shocking murder of Rabbi Tzvi Kogen. The rabbi, a dual Israeli-Moldovan citizen, went missing for days before his body was discovered by Emirati authorities.
In Iran, meanwhile, it's putting out reports today that it will be holding another round of nuclear talks with the European powers later this month. Is that true?
Well, I think, yes, those reports are true, but I do think they are nuclear negotiations. They are talks, preliminary talks, not even talks about talks, according to some reports. The Europeans are interpreting them as just a re-engagement with Tehran. So they're not negotiations, but the Iranians have an interest in hyping such engagements because let's not forget that the rial is plummeting at the moment, and any talk of momentum towards any kind of diplomatic deal with Western powers would help staunch the economic bleeding on that front. So I think we have to keep that all in mind.
Jason, thank you very much indeed. Jason Brodsky there. A gunman was shot dead in Jordan's capital city, Amman, this Sunday after he opened fire on 3 Jordanian police officers. The shooting happened not far from the Israeli embassy in the affluent Rabia neighbourhood. With more, here's our correspondent, Robert Swift.
In the early hours, as dawn broke over Amman, a gunman opened fire on a Jordanian police patrol. In the exchange that followed, the shooter was killed and 3 police officers wounded. The incident occurred in Rabia, a wealthy district in Amman that hosts Israel's heavily fortified embassy to Jordan. A direct connection to the embassy has not been demonstrated, but it is not ruled out either, due to frequent protests that take place in the neighbourhood against Israel and its military actions in the region.
It's been a relentless barrage of missiles fired at Israel this Sunday from Lebanon. 1 Hezbollah rocket slammed into the central city of Petah Tikva this morning, wounding a woman whose car caught fire. Israel responded with a warning to evacuate buildings in southern Beirut. We'll get an update from the north of Israel in just a moment. But first, this report from our Ariel Ossaran.
Ceasefire deal or no, Hezbollah is escalating its attacks on Israel. A Lebanese terror group launched over 200 rockets and drones at Israel by late Sunday afternoon, targeting dozens of communities and cities from the northern border to Haifa and central Israel. A total of 8 people were injured in various impact sites, one of whom in critical condition. Whether a combination of bad weather limiting Israel's ability to track launches or an attempt to save face amid negotiations of its retreat, Hezbollah seems eager to deepen its attacks on Israel.
Netanyahu and the enemy army are stalling, and in the meantime they hope to accomplish additional military achievements and impose their conditions under fire. This will not happen. We are the resistance and we will prevail.
Meanwhile, Israel continued to strike Hezbollah sites and launchers in southern Lebanon and weapons transfer routes in the Bekaa Valley. In Beirut's southern suburb, or Dahia, the IDF issued evacuation warnings before striking buildings housing Hezbollah assets.
When we get more detail. But let's talk more about Israel's war with the Iranian-backed terrorist group Hezbollah in Lebanon, because Israel has also been targeting the group's assets and personnel in neighbouring Syria. It is via Syria, from Iran, that the terrorist group receives its weapons. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, that's a UK-based group, claims that at least 90 people were killed in IDF strikes on the city of Palmyra in Syria. It says that dozens of pro-Iran militia members were also killed. That group has been accused of inflating casualty figures in the past. But to talk more about that, Colonel Rich Outson is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and a geopolitical consultant for Dragoman LLC. Thanks for being with us, Rich. So, I mean, this represents a massive uptick in attacks on Syria. Is this making a difference when it comes to preventing Hezbollah from rearming?
Well, it may be. It's a little early to tell, but there's been apparently some sort of back-channel negotiations trying to convince Assad that increasingly the mask is off Iran's regional war against Israel and American interests in the region, and they're using Syria quite openly as a launching pad for attacks and as a logistical supply line through to Hezbollah and Lebanon. So there's been pressure exerted and back-channel messaging about this might be a good time for you to stop doing that. There were rumors that Ron Dermer had been both in Moscow and in Washington pressing a plan to dangle sanctions relief for Assad in exchange for him choking off some of the supply lines coming in. But first of all, I don't think he'll do that. Assad is very deeply entwined with both Iran and with Lebanese Hezbollah. And second of all, until he does so, the prudent thing is to continue hitting the pro-Iranian militias, the IRGC, and the Hezbollah forces that are all throughout the depth of Syria.
Well, Saudis, Iranians, Israelis and Palestinians were gathered for a conference over the weekend that was led by the centre-left leader Yair Lapid. Lapid says that the Abraham Accords are the key to ending conflict in the region. Our senior correspondent Bianca Zanini reports.
As war and conflict rage in the Middle East, with a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, a traumatized Israel fighting on 7 fronts, and a Lebanon in the shadow of an Iranian-controlled Hezbollah. The Mitvim Institute for Regional Foreign Policies held a conference on strategies for the future and on the need for hope at a moment where hopelessness is flooding the region.
I think the most important message is that hope is realistic, it's feasible. It's not just some kind of a feeling or wishful thinking. I think that when we are looking at the Israeli public right now, the crucial junctures that we are at, the last couple of days with a discussion about the future of Gaza, a military control of the north part of Gaza, about annexation, we do see, and when we come together, we do see that those ideas are promoted by a minority government.
Well, there's further evidence of the ties between Russia and Yemen's Houthis now. Britain's Financial Times newspaper reports today on the presence of hundreds of Yemeni men who are fighting on the front lines in Ukraine. The men say they were promised salaries and a pathway to Russian citizenship. The scheme is linked to a prominent Houthi politician known as Abdulwali Abdul Hassan al-Jabri. We're here to talk more about all of that. We're joined by Ksenia Svetlova. She's a senior non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. Thank you very much for being with us. So, first of all, according to Britain's Ministry of Defence, Russia has chalked up around 700,000 casualties in its war on Ukraine. It's already recruiting North Koreans, now Yemenis. Can we read this as a sign of desperation?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's very, very clear that Russia is suffering huge losses on the battlefield. It is afraid to announce another official recruitment of young men, fearing the exodus of families, specifically young families from Russia. And it's hugely unpopular step. And I think that they exhorted their other resources, such as, for example, prisoners, whom they recruited about a year, and even more than that. And the prisons are empty now. It's not a joke. It's a true story from many, many Russian prisons.
The world's forgotten conflict now. The Sudanese army has retaken a key territory south of the capital, Khartoum. But after 19 months of fighting, no side is closer to victory, and it's civilians who are paying the price. Tens of thousands have been killed and more than 10 million displaced. Our Lynn Plachmeier has this report.
The Sudanese army has recaptured a key state capital south of Khartoum from the Sudanese Rapid Support Forces as fighting in Sudan's civil war continues. Sinjar was held by the RSF for 5 months and is a strategic prize located on a key road linking army-controlled areas of eastern and central Sudan. The Sudanese army has said that Sinjar, quote, had been liberated from the terrorist militia.